Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. For today's video, we're going to be going over all the books that I read in the month of February. I had a pretty, I kind of had a weird reading month this month, or last month. I definitely had a pretty mixed variety of genres, but there were two genres that I particularly had quite a few books in each, and that was romance as well as like murder mystery novels. So very polar opposite genres, but that is what I ended up reading the most of. And overall, I had a pretty good time. There were unfortunately no 5-star reads for me, but I did have a couple of 4.5, 4.75, just some that were like right there, but for whatever reason didn't make it to a 5-star rating for me. So I'll be talking about all the books I read in order of what I read first to last, and we'll just go about it that way. And I'll be referring to my reading journal. I have all my ratings and all my notes that I have in here. So let's get started. Okay, so the first book I read this month was Daisy Hates by Jessa Hastings. This is the second book in the Magnolia Parks universe, and this is the first book from Daisy and Christian's point of view. Now, I actually really enjoyed this book. I feel like this book is what really got me hooked into the Magnolia Parks universe, into the series. I was a little bit conflicted after the first book. I wasn't exactly sold. There were a couple things I wasn't a big fan of, but after reading this book, it definitely gave me a much better, it just gave me a better glimpse and understanding of some of the characters in this, because it is told from the perspective of two other individuals that are in this same kind of group. So this book I definitely enjoyed more than the first book, and this one totally got me sucked into the world. So I actually rated this a 4.5 stars, and that was because I thought this book was really well done. We got introduced to even more characters, and honestly, I like these characters a lot more than I thought I would. So for those reasons, I gave this book a 4.5 stars, and I loved it, and it was just a great way to start off the month. Okay, and then the next book I read was Crescent City 3, House of Flame and Shadow. This is written by Sarah J. Maas. Oh my gosh, you guys, I honestly don't really know where to start with this book. Personally, this is my least favorite book that Sarah J. Maas has written. Oh, I feel so strongly that this book was just a waste of time. I felt like there was so much info dumping, and honestly, for me, the Crescent City series has been the weakest of her series that she's written. I loved ACOTAR, I really enjoyed Throne of Glass, and I thought this series was going to also kind of live up to her writing style, which in a lot of ways it does. I really enjoyed the first Crescent City novel. I actually gave that one 5 stars, but I feel like from the second book and then this one, they've gotten progressively worse and just so heavy on the info dumping. The character development I feel like is really lacking, and I just didn't enjoy this at all, so I ended up giving this a 2.5 stars. Honestly, even half a star for me was just because we got to see some of those other characters that we were hoping to see. And I'm sorry to sound so negative, but I did not like this at all. So 2.5 stars, and I don't think I'll be picking up any more books in this series. Okay, so it was at this point in the month that I started picking up some romance books, and the first one I ended up going with was Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. This book is about childhood friends to lovers who basically go through a long period of time where they're no longer speaking, and they meet again in adulthood, and they kind of have a second chance romance from there. I really feel like the portrayal of all the different types of relationships that our main characters had with their friends, with their families, with each other. I feel like it was just really, really well done. The story is gorgeous. The characters are really compelling and so relatable for me personally. I just really loved it. I really enjoyed this book. The only reason why this book did not get 5 stars for me is just because of the fact that it is a little bit heavier and a little bit sad. Now, that doesn't take away anything from the story. It was just that I didn't know that going into this read, and I wasn't ready for a kind of heavier, sadder vibe. So yeah, I highly recommend this book. This was so beautiful. It just gives like soulmate vibes, like just very wholesome family soulmate vibes, and it was so well done, and I highly recommend. So the next book that I read is A Conjuring of Light by V.E. Schwab. So this is the third and final book in the Shades of Magic trilogy, and honestly, I really enjoyed this trilogy. especially this book. This book really just tied in the ending so well. I was so happy with what happened in the end, with all the characters, the resolution. I thought it was just really well done. And for me, this was the best book of the series. I gave this one 4.5 stars, and I just really, really enjoyed it. Now, I wouldn't say this series is a 5-star series for me. I feel like I had a little bit of problems with the pacing with this series. V.E. Schwab does tend to have a little bit of a slower pace in their writing style, but still, I thought the story was really good. The characters were well developed. I just had such a great time reading this series, so I definitely recommend. Okay, then getting back on the romance train, I picked up Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. Now, this was actually really refreshing for me to pick up after reading Love in Other Words, because this book has a very, very upbeat, positive, kind of energetic tone, and that totally helped me get back into a more kind of refreshed mindset. So in this book, we are following our main character, Elsie. So Elsie is a recently graduated physicist with her PhD, and she is struggling to get her foot in the world of academia. So in order for her to help pay the bills and just keep herself afloat after being a student full-time, she decided to sign herself up for a fake dating app. Now, one of her clients is actually a good friend of hers, and she ends up befriending him, and we find out that his big brother, Jack, is actually one of her long-term rivals in this physics realm, and we end up seeing their relationship kind of go from there. So I feel like this book did a really great job of balancing and keeping a strong dynamic between the romantic interests in this book as well as the plot that Elsie is going through as she tries to establish herself in the physics world. So overall, I thought the story was really well, and I did like the romantic interest, but there were a couple of things that I found a little conflicting. So this was my first book reading Ali Hazelwood's writing, and from what I gather, she does like to write big, strong, broody men paired with a very small female protagonist. So I didn't realize that going into this, and for me, it's not really something that I'm a big fan of. I just don't really care for that kind of a vibe. I feel like it can be a little cringy sometimes. So for me, that was an element that I didn't like. I also felt like Jack could be a little bit, like he could come off just kind of mean sometimes, and I just wasn't really here for it. So for that, I gave this book 4.5 stars, but I still really enjoyed it, and I think a lot of people would really enjoy this one too. Okay, so the next book I read is Magnolia Park's The Long Way Home. Now, this is the third book in the Magnolia Parks universe, and the second book written from Magnolia and BJ's point of view. Oh my gosh, this book did something to the chemistry in my brain. I don't know what, but this book was awesome. I loved this book. I will say I was a little hesitant going into this book because, like I mentioned before, I wasn't the biggest fan of Magnolia and BJ's point of view going into Daisy Hates, and I really thought after reading that book that I preferred their point of view. But after picking up this book for even like 20 pages in, I knew I was hooked. I was totally sold. Everything that happens in this book gives so much more perspective and just so much more depth to the characters that we've met earlier in the series, and I just thought this book was so good. I really loved it, and the only reason why this book did not get a 5-star rating from me is because I found one of the characters to be just absolutely annoying. So this series is full of very flawed characters, and I feel like one of the characters was doing a lot of hard work to try and make themselves better and try and grow. I feel like this one character kept trying to bring them back and make them regress into their old habits, and I just really didn't enjoy that aspect of it. I felt like that was not fair, and I really just wanted to see them learn their lessons, and it was really frustrating not seeing that happen. So for that reason, I gave it a 4.75 star, but I totally loved this book. It was still really great. So the next book I read was Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. So this book is a more YA romance book, so it does read a little bit younger. I also found the pace to be pretty slow in the beginning, but the story overall is really cute. So this book is following a high school senior named Liz, and Liz actually lost her mom when she was young, and the one thing that her and her mom really bonded over was watching rom-com movies. So there's a very heavily centered rom-com vibe in this book because Liz still loves to carry on that tradition and still loves to watch and listen to rom-com movies and soundtracks. So we see a lot of the book written from her perspective and just seeing her struggles as she is in her senior year of high school and trying to navigate going through these milestone moments without her mom being present. So I like that we see a lot of the internal side of Liz. We see the struggles that she's going through as well as be a high school student. So Liz actually has a childhood neighbor that she's pretty much grown up with, and they're kind of frenemies. So this neighbor, his name is Wes. Liz asks Wes for his help in getting her together with this other guy that she's interested in, and we kind of see the dynamic grow and change from there. So this was really cute. It was really sweet. I didn't feel super connected to the characters because it just did feel really young, but I still love this book and thought it was really cute. So I gave this one a 4.25 stars, I believe. Okay, so I'm kind of dreading talking about this next book, and that is The 7 Year Slip by Ashley Poston. I don't know what happened. I'm not sure if I was just maybe in a slump. Maybe I just wasn't in the headspace for another romance book. I'm not sure, but I picked this one up expecting it to be a possible 5-star read, and honestly, this was my least favorite romance book I read this month. I ended up giving this one a 3.5 stars because I just could not connect to the characters. I couldn't connect to the story. I just wasn't drawn into it enough to really care, and I just feel so disappointed. I'm just like so bummed because I really wanted this book to work out and to love it. So I don't know, I'm just disappointed it didn't turn out that way. You know, I might pick this book up again in the future and maybe try it again. Maybe it was just the wrong time, but yeah, unfortunately this one just wasn't it for me. So switching gears now into the more kind of gothic murder mystery novels that I was reading this month. So starting with Belladonna by Adeline Grace. This book is actually, I believe, a full series. There's maybe 3 or 4 books in this series already. I've heard a couple of conflicting things about this book. So this is a paranormal gothic romance as well as a murder mystery. So I did like those two elements combined. I felt like it definitely added to the storyline and just made it feel more engaging and more intriguing to me. But overall, I just didn't really love this book as much as other people did. I just don't feel like I'm very attached to the characters in this book or the story or what's happening. So I ended up giving this book 4 stars. I found it to be enjoyable as a standalone, but I don't think I'll be continuing the series. Okay, so the next book I picked up is Scythe, and this is written by Neal Shusterman. So this is the first book in a YA dystopian sci-fi series where there's a society. In this society, people have learned to basically overcome all kinds of ailments that humans go through, sickness and particularly death. So because people are no longer dying naturally, there are scythes who are basically used to control the population by people. The concept is absolutely what sparked my curiosity with this book. I've also heard a lot of great things about the series, so I was really intrigued to pick this up. And I will say, I think the execution was a little bit different than what I was expecting going into it. It does have a youthful tone, which is, you know, for like the YA element. I just felt like the story went in a direction different than where I was anticipating it to go. Not that it went in a direction that was bad, I was just along for the ride. I really couldn't guess where the story was going to go or what was going to happen, and I'm overall happy with where it went, and I think I will pick up the next book in the series, but I'm not 100% sold if I'm gonna finish it or if it's gonna be good enough for me to want to continue. I'm not sure. I basically gave this book 4 stars. I enjoyed it, but yeah, I'm not sure if I will be continuing it or not. Okay, so then the next book I read was The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. This book was actually pretty interesting. So this is a murder mystery book. So there's this big masquerade ball that is happening where a lot of guests are attending, and we are reading from the perspective of one of these guests. So somebody is murdered while this party is taking place, And now this guest gets involved in a type of mysterious game where he wakes up every day in the body of a different guest attendant who was at this party, and he is trying to solve the murder mystery. So the way that this book is written, I feel like is very unique. The tone is very eerie. It's a great book to read in fall. I feel like I should have picked this book up at the beginning of the month instead of at the end, because this was complicated. There are a ton of guests, a lot of people that you have to familiarize yourself with. And each day you're reading from the point of view of somebody new, somebody different, and the characters that they're associated with. So I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I definitely almost DNF'd this book because it was so complicated with the characters and just what was happening the whole time. So I gave this book 3 stars. I don't think I'll ever read this again. All right, and then the last book that I read in the month of February was Killer Instinct by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is the second book in the Natural series, and I'm so glad that I saved this book for last. This book kind of saved me from falling into a reading slump after reading The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. The pace in this book is so fast. It's easy to read. It's just so engaging and entertaining and fun, and I've just had a great time with this series so far. I have no complaints with where it's gone. The story has developed in a way that I feel like makes a lot of sense. In case you're not familiar, The Naturals is about a young group of high school students who are gifted, and those gifts are recognized by the FBI, and they basically are recruited to help solve cold case murder mysteries. Now, the gifts that these students have are not like your typical fantasy superpowers. They're actually a lot more like Criminal Minds. So our main character in this book, she's a profiler, so she can observe people's body language, behaviors, things like that, and paint a picture of like who their personality is and what their motives are and what they might do next. We have someone who can read emotions. We have someone who's basically like a human lie detector. Another one of the students is really good with data and crunching numbers. You really get this cool blend of different gifts. You really get to see their strengths as they go and solve these cases, and I just thought it was so cool, so much fun, and I thought this was a really fun book for me. This got me back in the right headspace to kind of jump into the month of March so I can be ready for these reads and just get me excited. But yeah, so I ended up having a great time with this story, and I really liked it. All right, you guys, that was it for today's video. Thank you so much for tuning in with me and hanging out. I hope you guys had a great reading month as well in February. Give this video a thumbs up or comment down below if you like these books, if you've read them, if you want to read them. Know your thoughts in the comments below, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.